Americans have known this for decades and have done little to nothing. These are our children. No wonder why America being judged is under judgment. Americans, the list that I'm getting ready to show you should come as no surprise as to what is taking place in our country for the last several decades. It explains why we have seen that our said representatives are continuously bearing forth corrupt fruit. For decades we have known of this corruption, and now it is all coming to light.
Misery.
Yes, pure misery. And friends, for the record, a corrupt tree is not going to bring forth good fruit. It is, without a doubt, going to bring forth corrupt fruit. The scripture is clear. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. And no matter how many different ways or methods these people try to put themselves up as the righteous, the Lord will bring, and no doubt is bringing it into the light as to who they really are. Before we get into this list, and it wasn't the Epstein list, let me remind you that these are the same criminal politicians that have advocated for sodomy, pedophilia, and pornography as free speech. The list of 87. Democratic Illinois State Representative Keith Farnham has resigned and was charged with possession of child pornography and has been accused of bragging at an online site about sexually molesting a 6-year-old girl. Democratic spokesman for the Arkansas Democratic Party, Harold M. Moody Jr., was charged with distribution and possession of child pornography. Democratic Radnor Township Board of Commissioner member Philip Eyre resigned from his position after being charged with possession of child pornography and abusing children between 2 and 6 years old. Democratic activist BLM organizer Charles Wade was arrested and charged with human trafficking and underage prostitution. Democratic Texas attorney and activist Mark Barnavides was charged with having sex with a minor, including a child under the age of 18, to have sex and compelling prostitution, and of at least 9 legal clients in possession of child pornography. He was found guilty on 6 counts of sex trafficking. Democratic Virginia delegate Joe Mosley was indicted on charges connected to his relationship with a 17-year-old girl and was charged with supervisory indecent liberties with a minor, electronic solicitation of a minor, possession of child pornography, and distribution of child pornography. Democratic Massachusetts Congressman Gary Stubbs was censored by the House of Representatives after he admitted to an inappropriate relationship with a 17-year-old. Democratic former mayor of Stillwater, New York, Rick Nelson, pled guilty to 5 counts of possession of child pornography of children less than 16 years of age. Democratic former mayor of Clayton, New York, Dale Kenyon, was indicted for sexual acts against a teenager. Democratic former mayor of Hubbard, Ohio, Richard Keenan, was given a life sentence in jail for raping a 4-year-old girl.
allegations this morning facing the State Department.
That's right. According to internal State Department memos, the agency might have called off or intervened in investigation into possibly illegal and inappropriate behavior within its ranks, allegedly to protect jobs and avoid scandals. This concerns the time that Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. We want to get right to NBC's Chief White House correspondent Chuck Todd with the latest. Chuck, good morning to you.
Good morning, Savannah. You know, there's an old saying in Washington that the cover-up is worse than the crime. But in this case, both parts of it are disturbing. Allegations of prostitution and pedophilia, and allegations that those crimes were somehow covered up or not looked into. So the State Department this morning is having to respond to those claims and those investigations of misconduct by State Department officials, including by an ambassador and security agents attached to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And the allegations are that these investigations were whitewashed, quashed altogether, and that those orders came from high up.
NBC News has obtained
You
documents.
see through the game.
There is more. Democratic former mayor of Winston, Oregon, Kenneth Barrett, was arrested for setting up a meeting to have sex with a 14-year-old girl who turned out to be a police officer. Democratic former mayor of Randolph, Nebraska, Dwayne L. Schultz, was arrested and charged with 4 counts of felony, third-degree sexual assault of a child, and 1 count of intentional child abuse. Democratic former mayor of Dawson, Georgia, Christopher Wright, was indicted on the charges of aggravated child molestation, aggravated sodomy, rape, child molestation, and statutory rape of an 11-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. Democratic former mayor of Stockton, California, Anthony Silva, was charged with providing alcohol to young adults during a game of strip poker that included a 16-year-old boy at a camp for underprivileged children run by the mayor. Democratic former mayor of Millbrook, New York, Donald Briggs, was arrested and charged with inappropriate sexual contact with a person younger than 17. Democratic Party leader of Victoria County, Texas, Stephen Jabor, pleaded guilty to possession and receiving over 500,000 child pornographic images. Democratic activist and fundraiser Terrence Bean was arrested on charges of sodomy and sex abuse in a case involving a 15-year-old boy. And when the alleged victim declined to testify, and the judge then dismissed the case. Democratic Party chairman for Davidson County, Tennessee, Rodney Mullen, resigned amid child pornography allegations. Democratic activist Andrew Douglas Reed pleaded guilty to multiple counts of second-degree and sexual exploitation of a minor for producing child pornography. Democratic official from Terre Haute, Indiana, David Roberts, was sentenced to federal prison for producing and possessing child pornography, including placing hidden cameras in the bedrooms and bathrooms at a home he shared with 2 minor female victims. Democratic California Congressman Tony Cardenas is being sued in LA County for allegedly sexually abused a 16-year-old girl. Democratic aides to Senator Barbara Boxer, Jeff Rosetta, pleaded guilty to charges of trading in child pornography. Democratic Alaskan State Representative Dean Westlake resigned from his seat after the media published a report alleging he fathered a child with a 16-year-old girl when he was 28. Democratic New Jersey State Assemblyman Neil Cohen, who was convicted of possession and distribution of child pornography. Republican Tim Nolan, chairman of Donald Trump's presidential campaign in Kentucky, pled guilty to child sex trafficking, and on February 11, 2018, he was sentenced to serve 20 years in prison. Republican State Senator Ralph Shorty was indicted on 4 counts of human trafficking and child pornography. In November 2017, he pleaded guilty to 1 count of child sex trafficking in exchange for dropping the other charges. Republican anti-abortion activist Howard Scott Heraldith is a convicted child rapist in Florida. Republican County Commissioner David Swartz pleaded guilty to molesting 2 girls under the age of 11 and was sentenced to about 8 years in prison. Republican Judge Mark Pazonich pleaded guilty, no contest, to fondling a 10-year-old girl and was sentenced to 10 years probation. Republican anti-abortion activist Nicholas Mornsey pleaded guilty to possession of child pornography on his computer and offering a bounty to anybody who murders an abortion doctor. Republican legislator Edison Misla Orlando was sentenced to 10 years in prison for raping his daughter between the ages of 9 to 17. Republican Mayor Philip Giordano is serving a 37-year sentence in federal prison for sexually abusing 8 and 10-year-old girls. Republican campaign consultant Tom Shortridge was sentenced to 3 years probation for taking nude photographs of a 15-year-old girl. Republican Senator Storm Thurmond, a notable racist, had sex with a 15-year-old black girl, which produced a child. Republican pastor Mike Hintz, whom George W. Bush commended during the 2004 presidential campaign, surrendered to police after admitting to a sexual affair with a female juvenile. Republican legislator Peter Dibble pleaded no contest to having an inappropriate relationship with a 13-year-old girl. Republican Congressman Donald Buzz Lunkins was found guilty of having sex with a female minor and sentenced to 1 month in jail. Republican fundraiser Richard A. Delgado was found guilty of child porn charges and paying 2 teenage girls to pose for sexual photos. Republican activist Mark A. Grethen convicted on 6 counts of sex crimes involving children. Republican activist Randall David Anarchy pleaded guilty to attempted sexual assault on a child. Republican Congressman Dan Crane had sex with a female minor while working as a congressional page. Republican activist and Christian coalition leader Beverly Russell admitted to an incestuous relationship with his stepdaughter. Republican Congressman and anti-gay activist Robert Boehm was charged with having sex with a 16-year-old boy he picked up at a gay bar. Republican committeeman Jerry Patty was arrested for distributing a video clip of a 5-year-old girl being raped. Republican activist Marty Glickman, a.k.a. Republican Marty, was taken into custody by Florida police on 4 counts of unlawful sexual activity with an underage girl and 1 count of delivering the drug LSD. Republican legislative aide Howard L. Brooks was charged with molesting a 12-year-old boy and possession of child pornography. Republican Senate candidate John Hathaway is accused of having sex with a 12-year-old boy babysitter and withdrew his candidacy after the allegations were reported in the media. Republican preacher Stephen White, who demanded a return to traditional values, was sentenced to jail after offering a $20 bill to a 14-year-old boy for permission to perform oral sex on him. Republican preacher Stephen White, who demanded a return to traditional values, was sentenced to jail after offering $20 to a 14-year-old boy for permission to perform oral sex on him. I know this is hard, I know this is rough, but we cannot turn the cheek, we cannot turn a blind eye. Republican talk show host John Matthews pleaded guilty to exposing his genitals to an 11-year-old girl. Republican talk show host John Matthews pleaded guilty to exposing his genitals to an 11-year-old girl. How sick. Republican anti-gay activist Earl Butch Kemmerlin was sentenced to 40 years in prison for molesting an 8-year-old girl after he attempted to stop a gay couple from adopting her. Republican Party leader Paul Ingram pleaded guilty to 6 counts of raping his daughters and served 14 years in federal prison. Republican Election Board official Kevin Cohn was sentenced to 2 years probation for soliciting sex over the internet from a 14-year-old girl. Republican politician Andrew Burr was charged with 2 counts of first-degree sodomy with a 13-year-old boy. Republican politician Keith Westmoreland was arrested on 7 felony counts of lewd and lascivious expedition to girls under the age of 16, i.e. exposing himself to children. See, each state or each, depending on where you get charged, they have different wording. It's all mumbo jumbo. Republican anti-abortion activist John Allen Burt was charged with sexual misconduct involving a 15-year-old girl. Republican County Councilman Kayla Childs pleaded guilty to molesting a male child. Republican activist John Butler was charged with criminal sexual assault on a teenage girl. Republican candidate Richard Gardner admitted to molesting his two daughters. Republican councilman and former Marine Jack W. Gardner was convicted of molesting a 16-year-old girl. Republican County Commissioner Merrill Robert Barter pleaded guilty to unlawful sexual contact and assault on a teenage boy. Unbelievable. Republican City Councilman Fred C. Smeltzer Jr. pleaded no contest to raping a 15-year-old girl and served 6 months in prison. Republican activist Peter J. Bina pleaded guilty to possession of child pornography on his home computer and was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison and fined $18,000. I'm sure he learned his lesson. Republican parole board officer and former Colorado State Representative Larry Jack Swartz was fired after child pornography was found in his possession. Republican strategist and Citadel Military College graduate Robin Vanderwall was convicted in Virginia on 5 counts of soliciting sex from boys and girls over the internet. Republican City Councilman Mark Harris, who is described as a good military man and churchgoer, was convicted of repeatedly having sex with an 11-year-old girl and was sentenced to 12 years in prison. You can only imagine this list and how many of these are the first times they got caught or what have you. Republican businessman John Grunseth withdrew his candidacy from Minnesota governor after allegations surfaced that he went swimming in the nude with 4 underage girls, including his daughter. Republican director of the Young Republican Federation, Nicholas Elizondo, molested his 6-year-old daughter and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. Republican benefactor of conservative Christian groups, Richard A. Dason Sr., was charged with rape for allegedly paying a 15-year-old girl for sex. Dason, 62, is married with grown children and served several grandchildren. Sorry about that. Has allegedly told police that over the past decade he paid more than $1 million to have sex with a large number of young women. Democratic donor and billionaire Jeffrey Epstein ran an underage child sex brothel and was convicted of soliciting underage girls for prostitution. Democratic New York Congressman Anthony Weiner pleaded guilty to transferring obscene material to a minor as part of a plea agreement for sexted and sending Twitter DMs to underage girls as young as 15. Democratic donor, activist, and Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein, the gatekeeper, is being criminally prosecuted and civilly sued for years of sexual abuse that was well-known secret in Hollywood, including underage sexual activities with aspiring female actresses. Democratic activist and Me Too proponent Asia Argentino settled a lawsuit for sexual harassment stemming from sexual activities with underage actor. Democratic mayor of Racine, Wisconsin. Used to live right by there. I've been to Racine many a times. I lived in Kenosha. Gary Becker was convicted of attempted child seduction, child pornography, and other child sex crimes. Democratic Seattle Mayor Ed Murray resigned after multiple accusations of child sexual abuse were levied against him, including by family members. Democratic activist and aide to NYC Mayor de Blasio, Jacob Schwartz, was arrested on possession of 3,000 plus child pornographic images. These people are sick. Democratic activist and actor Russell Simmons was sued based on allegations of sexual assault, where he coerced an underage model for sex. Imagine that. Democratic governor of Oregon, Neil Goldschmidt, after being caught by a newspaper, publicly admitted to having a past sexual relationship with a 13-year-old girl. After the statute of limitations on rape had expired, Democratic Illinois Congressman Mel Reynolds resigned from Congress after he was convicted of statutory rape of a 16-year-old campaign volunteer. Democratic New York Congressman Fred Richmond was arrested in Washington, D.C. for soliciting sex from a 16-year-old boy. Democratic activist, donor, and director Roman Polanski fled the country after pleading guilty to statutory rape of a 13-year-old girl. Democrats and Hollywood actors still defend him to this day, including Whoopi, Martin Scorsese, Woody Allen, David Lynch, Wim Wenders, Pedro Almodovar, Tilda Swinton, and Monica Bellucci. A Democratic state senator from Alaska, George Jacko, was found guilty of sexual harassment of underage legislative page. Democratic state representative candidate for Colorado, Andrew Myers, was convicted of possession of child pornography and enticing children. Democratic Illinois Congressman Gus Savage was investigated by the Democratic-controlled House Committee on Ethics for attempting to rape an underage female Peace Corps volunteer in Zaire. The committee concluded that while the events did not occur, his apology was sufficient and took no further action. Democratic activist, donor, and spokesperson for Subway, Jared Fogle, was convicted of distribution and receipt of child pornography and traveling to engage in illicit sexual conduct with a minor. Democratic State Department official Carl Carey, under Hillary Clinton's State Department, was arrested on 10 counts of child porn possession. Democratic Maine Assistant Attorney General James Cameron was sentenced to just over 15 years in federal prison for 7 counts of child porn possession, receipt, and transmission of. Democratic State Department official Daniel Rosen, under Hillary Clinton's State Department, was arrested and charged with allegedly soliciting sex from a minor over the internet. Democratic State Department officials James Cafferty pleaded guilty to 1 count of transportation of child pornography. Democratic radio host Bernie Ward pled guilty to 1 count of sending child pornography over the internet. Democratic Deputy Attorney General from California Raymond Liddy was arrested for possession of pornography. Knowing all of this, the people should demand the halls of government be vetted. Hell yeah. Americans, it is not enough to know about the corrupt fruit of the branches. It is for we the people to know, lay out the axe, to root out, to the root of the tree and cut it down for our kids' sake. It couldn't be more well said. Matthew 3:10. DC Dirty Laundry, airing out America's dirty laundry. A great little site to get over to. This is one I stumbled across late last night. I thought I'd bring it to you. The 87 politicians exposed for their crimes against, when you put it this way, it's almost against humanity, folks. It's our kids. Most precious thing here, our future, and all these horrific crimes. Some of them covered, some of them got some time. But Bradley Dean, thank you. All right, again, I am Michael. This is the Patriot Hour. God bless, Godspeed to each and every one of you. And where we go one, we go all. Thank you.